Welcome to the YouTube channel for my new book, Seed of Israel, DNA Guide to Tracing Your Jewish Ancestry, available now on Amazon in ebook and paperback versions. Also, be sure to hit that subscribe button to get more videos like this. In this video, I want to talk about a recent archaeological discovery made in Lithuania that I think is really fascinating. And one of the reasons I think it's really fascinating is because it demonstrates the ties between Jews in Europe and on the land of Israel. And this is basically a couple hundred years ago, 200 years ago, which I'm going to get into this this archaeological discovery that was made. I then want to talk briefly about the Jews of Lithuania and how I believe that it, in a nutshell, they represent the Rhineland theory of Jewish migration, which is what I've talked about before in previous videos and I wrote about in my book, which is basically the theory that the Jews of antiquity spread out from the land of Israel, from Judea to across the Mediterranean, and then a Jewish community was established in the Italian peninsula, in Rome, other parts of Italy, and these Jews made a slow migration northwards up to Rhineland Pfalz in modern-day Germany, and at some point, didn't happen all at once, but in the Middle Ages and a little bit and later, maybe starting in the 12th century, which I'm going to get into, and then possibly even more in the next few hundred years, there was an eastward migration to Lithuania, Poland, other areas of Central and Eastern Europe. But I also want to briefly talk about how there were other Jews that ended up in what was really for a long period the center of the Jewish world in Eastern Europe. And some of them were Sephardic Jews, others were Mizrahi Jews. So, I just really want to relay, and I'm just going to keep talking about this, that there's just this connection. There's always been this connection between Jews and in the diaspora, whether they were in Europe, in Spain, in Babylon, other areas in Israel, other areas in the Middle East and North Africa. And this connection is very strong, and I think it needs to be acknowledged and recognized. So I'm just going to go into it really quick. So the headline is in the Jerusalem Post is "Archaeologists Find Inscriptions in Destroyed Vilna Synagogue." So basically, there have been excavations going on at the Great Synagogue of Vilna, which was built between 1630 and 1633, and which stood on the spot of an existing synagogue that was built in 1572. And that site had been used to house a Jewish house of prayer. Had been used to house a Jewish house of prayer in 1440. So this Great Synagogue of Vilna was damaged in World War II. It was basically torched by the Nazis and their collaborators, and then it was demolished by the Soviets in around between 1955 and 1957, and replaced by a kindergarten and a primary school. So basically the Nazis partly destroyed it and during World War II, and the Soviets finished the job. So these archaeological excavations have been led by a team from the Israel Antiquities Authority, and as well as others. And they've been going on for a while, for a few years, at least since 2016. And so they made some really interesting discoveries. And the most recent discovery is these Hebrew inscriptions from 200 years ago, dating to 1796. And they were part of a stone Torah reading table that stood on the bima of the synagogue. The table was donated, according to the text, and I'm just reading from the Jerusalem Post article here, by two brothers, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shmuel, in memory of their mother Sarah and their father Rabbi Chaim, who had immigrated from Lithuania and settled in Tiberias, in Israel, which is on the Galilee. It was from this table that the Torah was read to the congregants for about 200 years, until the burning of the synagogue and its final destruction by the Soviets 70 years ago. So, and I'll leave links to this. Really, I think is a really amazing discovery of these Hebrew inscriptions. So, who are the Lithuanian Jews? Well, the Lithuanian Jews are also called Litvaks, are Jews who lived in present-day Lithuania, Belarus, Latvia, northeastern Suwalki and Bialystok region of Poland, and some border areas of Russia and Ukraine. So it was home to a very large and influential Jewish community that either fled or were murdered in the Holocaust and the Shoah. So when did the Jews start settling in Lithuania? Well, according to this Wikipedia article, Jews began living in Lithuania as early as the 13th century. In 1388, they were granted a charter by Vytautas, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, under which they formed a class of freemen subject in all criminal cases directly to the jurisdiction, etc., etc., etc. So there were some expulsions and they came back, but I'm just really interested in the formation of this community. Where'd they come from? Well, basically, they were invited to Lithuania by Gediminas, the Grand Duke of Lithuania. In his letters that were written in 1323 to 1324 that were sent to Western Europe. And it was written in Latin. And one of the groups that this letter, this invitation was directed to were the Jews, German Jews. It says his invitation notably included German Jews as well as Christians, and its issuance is closely linked to the establishment of the Jewish community in Lithuania. So, there's some evidence that, yeah, these were German Jews that founded the Jewish community in Lithuania, which again aligns with the Rhineland theory. So there are some other articles here that I'd like to cite that also go into the origins of the Eastern European Jews and how many of them migrated from Germany and Western Europe. So I'll leave links to all those, and yeah. So this article states that the beginnings of Jews from France and Germany, the so-called Ashkenazim, to Eastern Europe are largely obscure. Clearly, up into the mid-13th century, there were only small groups of Jews in Eastern Europe. They were in contact with the Ashkenazi centers and probably also originated from there. However, these family groups do not seem to have left any trace. Bernard Weinrib quotes an exchange of letters from the 1210s in which the Rabbi Judah ben Samuel, the Pious, circa 1150 to 1217 of Regensburg, informed Rabbi Eliezer ben Yitzhak of Prague that Jews without religious education lived in the territories of what is now Poland and Russia. Without the support of their fellow Jews from Central Europe, they would remain without a knowledge of the Torah and Halakha and without organized religious services. The question of the early Jewish settlement in Eastern Europe and its cultural achievements is currently arousing great interest, etc., etc. And it says the real immigration to Eastern Europe began with when the legal conditions for Jews improved considerably thanks to the charters issued by the Polish Duke Boleslaw, 1221 to 1279, in 1264, and by King Casimir the Great, 1310 to 1370, in 1334. In Lithuania, and this is, I mentioned this earlier, the Grand Duke Vytautas the Great, circa 1350 to 1430, created important privileges for the Jews of the Brest, Litovsk, and Trekkai in 1388. And as a result, an important Karaite community settled in Lithuania. The Karaite Jews, which I'll go into in a future video, are Jews who only accept the Tanakh, the written books of Moses. They do not accept the oral law. They do not accept rabbinic Judaism. They also only accept patrilineal descent, as opposed to the rabbinic Jews who mostly, although that's starting to change, accept matrilineal descent, which is halakhic, as written in the Talmud. So there's not many of these Karaite Jews. I think there was a large community in Egypt, in Eastern Europe, and again, and there's a small community, I believe, in Israel. At a future video, I talked about the Samaritans, who branched off, the Karaite Jews, a little different history. Their religious observance is different, but the same source population, Middle Eastern, just like other diaspora Jews. Israelites on the Y-DNA side mostly, and the MTD is a little bit more mixed, which is typical of the diaspora communities. Okay, so right, so there was also a larger movement to the east amongst German-speaking people. It was called Ostsiedlung, which means east settling in German. And it was a German eastward expansion during the medieval era, and settlement of Germanic-speaking peoples from the Holy Roman Empire, especially its southern and western portions, into less populated regions of Central Europe, parts of West Europe and the Balkans. So Ashkenazi Jews who were living in Germany were a part of this expansion eastward. So, and mostly into Poland. So it says since the beginning of the 14th, 15th centuries, the Polish Silesian Piast dynasty reinforced Jewish German settlers on the land, who in decades founded more than 150 towns and villages under German town law, particularly under the law of the town Magdeburg. Ethnic Germans, along with German-speaking Ashkenazi Jews from the Rhineland, also formed a large part of the town population of Krakow. And so, yeah, and this just goes into the Piast rulers in Poland, and it says Jewish settlement was taking place in Poland since very early times. In 1264, Duke Boleslaw the Pious of Greater Poland granted the privileges of the Statute of Kalisz, which specified a broad range of freedoms of religious practices, movement, and trading for the Jews. It also created a legal precedent for the official protection of Jews from local harassment and exclusion, etc. Okay, the act exempted the Jews from enslavement or serfdom and was the foundation of Jewish prosperity in the Polish kingdom. It was later followed by many other comparable legal pronouncements. Following a series of expulsions of Jews from Western Europe, Jewish communities were established in Krakow, Kalisz, and elsewhere in Western and Southern Poland in the 13th century. Another series of communities were established at Lviv, Brest-Litovsk, and Grodno, further east in the 14th century. King Casimir received Jewish refugees from Germany in 1349, which assisted the acceleration of a Jewish expansion in Poland that continued until World War II. So, again, this just solidifies what, the Rhineland theory of Rhineland Jews, Jews from Germany, who were Italian Jews, who before that were Judeans, either brought over as slaves to Rome or who were traders and merchants in the Mediterranean diaspora. And then I briefly want to just go into, the strong connection between the Jews in Europe and Jews elsewhere in the diaspora, whether in the Sephardic Jews or the Mizrahi Jews, the Jews in Muslim lands. There was just this constant flow between the different communities. I want to make a future video about this, but I just want to briefly discuss that, and then we'll wrap up the video. So this article, which I'll post a link to, says that by 1500 there was a Christian world north of the Mediterranean and a Muslim world south. Unlike during the Roman Empire, where people could travel and trade anywhere easily, the conquest by the Muslims meant that these two worlds were divided. Jews were the bridge. The Christians could not go south and feel safe. The Muslims could not go to Europe without the threat of enslavement or persecution. The Jews, however, had a special passage and were acceptable in both communities. So, and then it goes to say, Jews were a much smaller percentage of the total population in Christian Europe than they were in the Muslim countries. Although in the absence of an official census, no one knows exact numbers. Estimates are that in all of Western Europe by the late Middle Ages, there may have been 250,000 Jews in a general community of 10 to 15 million people. After 1200 and more Jews left the Muslim world, okay, I want to repeat that. After 1200 and more Jews left the Muslim world, which was on the decline, and slowly the European Jewish population grew in countries such as Italy, France, Germany, England, Portugal, Turkey, and the Eastern Mediterranean. Okay. Okay, and then I just want to really briefly go into, let's see. So basically, what this article is saying is that let's see, part about Poland. Right, so Poland was really the center of Jewish life, and there were Jews that went to Poland, not only across Europe, amongst the Ashkenazi, but also the Sephardic Jews who were expelled from Spain and Portugal, and also Mizrahi Jews as well from the great Jewish centers of the Middle East, such as Babylonia and other areas. So just to wrap up, I'll get into this again more in future videos, but I just wanted to demonstrate that the connections between the land of Israel and the diaspora that were always ongoing since the beginning of the diaspora, and then the connection between the Jews of the diaspora, which was always ongoing, whether they were in Europe, North Africa, the Middle East, and there were Jews in Europe who went to the Middle East. There were Middle Eastern Jews that went to Europe, and I want to get more into that, but I think that's just an important note to me, So thank you for watching.